if you go back to 1985, this guy had 15 fights in 1985. 15 of them. All knockouts. All knockouts.
Yes, well, I've heard that he's obviously he's done really well in his cannabis business, and I think it's going to be in Las Vegas. I think, don't hold me that, but he's opening up some cannabis ranch.
It's called the Tyson Ranch. It's there. Hi people, how you doing? It's Andy and Max here today, and we're going to be doing a start of a new bit of adventure. We're going to talk about old boxing greats of the past, didn't we, mate?
Yes, we are, Andy. I can't wait.
Exactly. So, of course, in our era, we had a bit of a vote. Who are we going to go for? I bet you can't guess. You will, because you would have read the title. It's going to be Mike Tyson. Okay, absolute, classic boxer. So, let's go straight into it. Mike Tyson, he was born on June 30th, right? And that is 1966, which makes him 13 years older than me. Former professional fighter, but more than that, he was one of the most recognised and is one of the most recognised athletes in the world today. And over the course of his career, he's been known for his quick and powerful punches, his controversial behaviour outside of the ring. But despite all of his ups and downs, right, his legacy as a fighter is going to be iconic, and it's going to endure for many, many years.
Oh, yes, definitely. He's not only is he like one of the best boxers, I reckon, in my time and probably ever, he's got some great achievements to go with.
Exactly, because he grew up in Brooklyn, in New York, so he wasn't given all the best advantage in life. He grew up in a rough neighbourhood where he learned to defend himself at such a young age. He began boxing. He was only 14, which makes him actually, he was older than I was when I started, and he quickly made a name for himself as an amateur fighter. And in 1985, 18 years old, he turns pro and then terrorises the boxing world.
But before we get into the sort of him coming pro now, in 1981 and 82, right, he was the youngest gold medalist with the fastest knockout of 8 seconds.
Yeah, and I think we're going to show a clip of that. It was incredible.
Yes, that never stopped. That was just the start of it.
Yeah.
And like you said, you just mentioned, 19 years old, not quite 20, and he fought Trevor Berbick. Even though I got it weird down, I'll say it wrong.
I'll tell you what, though, before we get to that, his career wasn't without a bit of controversy, was it, really? In 92, convicted for rape. That must have been, and he still protests his innocence to this day. He's just released a documentary, and he said, she was a vile, horrible person. And you have to sort of sit there and you don't really know. I mean, he was quite honest in this documentary. He told me, not me, but he told the world he was a bit promiscuous when he was younger. But where for you did it all go wrong for him? I mean, he won the world title, the youngest ever heavyweight. Obviously, you were right. Trevor Berbick is who he banged out. But, one of the things where I think it went wrong for him was the death of Customato. That was such a big thing for him.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I believe if it wasn't for Customato, right, I think Tyson would have been in prison probably before his 18th birthday for life, I reckon. And that man saved him and put him on the... And as we're going to find out, become one of the greatest boxers of his division, and also known as the baddest man on the planet.
Well, there is that. I mean, but going over his controversy, there's one person he hates, I think, more than anyone else. Don King. I mean, he really hates Don King, doesn't he? And I have to sit there and put my hand in the air. Now, this is the second iteration of Fighters Talk TV, right? And because Don King got the first one taken off because I slated him. Right, and that's how bad this guy is, right? I slated him, I got 2 million views on the video, and then Don King Productions had it taken down. I mean, I
do say, Andy, truth hurts, doesn't it?
Yeah, done it just. And I'm going to do it again. Because listen, in the UK and the US freedom speech, so guys, when that comes out, that episode, right, you watch Tubbs give it to Don King. I don't give a fuck. I don't care. That's how it goes. I'll call it as it is. You don't have to like me. I'm not here to be liked. But at the end of the day, that's how stupid this was. He had our other channel taken down. So, you know, and Mike Tyson was no different. And Tyson reckoned Don King stole 100 million off of him.
Listen, I don't doubt that one bit. That man is a crook. And I won't say too much in case he comes after me, you know.
Well, he's old man now. But, I mean, some of the stories about Don King, but we'll do some bits and pieces about him another time. They're pretty savage. Yeah, they're pretty savage, aren't they? But talking about Tyson, I mean, let's talk about his knockout power. I mean, that was legendary.
Right, I don't know if you've seen it, but have you seen his famous knockout where he ups the geezer and he's in the middle of the ring and he actually leaves the floor by a sort of a couple of inches? He gets the ropes in the air. Right, that's the power that man was generating, like at 20 years old.
Well, the other thing to think about, for a heavyweight fighter, he's very small. So I'm nearly 6'1", right? You've got to be 6'1", 6'2", something like that, coming close to that. He was 5'11", 5'10", 5'11", right? But he was what I like to call dirty, grubby fighter, which is what I had no choice but to be like that. And he's very similar, and there was another fighter very similar to him around the same era, Tommy Morrison. If you guys remember him, he was in the Rocky V, and Tommy the Duke Morrison, very, very similar fighter to him. Not very tall for a heavyweight, but heavy set, quick hands, vicious punches. Both of them very similar.
Yeah, and that Tommy was like an All-American, wasn't he? You know, he come from like an All-American family, like wrestlers, footballers, boxers.
Well, he was related to John Wayne, wasn't he? Allegedly, wasn't he? So, but I mean, going back to Tyson, so they were the two sort of grubby, dirty fighters. But Tyson, I always remember when watching him, he terrorised them in the mind before he even got there, didn't he? And a lot of them.
Listen, that man, when he looked at you, it had looks of, I'm going to kill you, you know, and he literally...
Didn't he say that to him half the time?
Yeah, he did, and even Cuss said, that man hits with bad intentions, you know, but it won him the championship, you know, and he didn't care how big the man was, you know, look, Frank Bruno, size of him, you know, 6'7" or something, and he Bruno.
Yeah, 90. Really big guy, really big bloke.
Big muscle, and Tyson didn't care. He was in there, just done his business, and he didn't give a shit how big he was, or how small he was, or how hard you thought he was.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to become the youngest ever world champion was something in itself, wasn't it? I mean, he was totally...
He was the first heavyweight to hold the WBA, the WBC, and the IBF.
That's right, he was. He won the IBF title as well. So if we can show some of this, he won the IBF title from Tony Tucker, right? We know another different Tony Tucker, obviously, and we'll talk about that. I mean, it was great. He won it on points.
Yeah, sorry, but he was like the only heavyweight to unify them in succession. You know, that's some seriousness there.
Oh yeah. And later, of course, Lennox Lewis was the one to actually succeed that, wasn't he, and do well with there. So I mean, he won the WBC first, right? Then he took the WBA title, then it was the IBF title. So there's sort of three. There's a load of other sorts of different bits and pieces as well that are going in there, and of course then he goes to prison, doesn't he?
Yeah,
I mean, and that's a big thing, isn't it?
I like to talk about I can't remember now, but the biggest upset of his career.
Oh wow! Buster Douglas, James Buster Douglas. Yeah, and it was bad.
I've said this for 30 years, Andy. He should have never had that fight because it was just after the death of Customata, and he should have never had that fight. But Don King got his claws in him by then.
Well, I mean, we've seen a similar thing that happens. It's all about the money. It's all about the Benjamins, as they say, right? We've just seen a similar fight between, I know we've been banging on about it, between Garcia and Tank Davis, right? We have seen a very similar thing. It is very clear that Garcia was injured going into that fight with the ribs. Very, very clear. And this is the thing. Rather than pull out of the fight because of injury, they carry on through it because of the money. Yeah, sometimes the health of the athlete should really come in, and it's not just physical health, it's mental health.
Yes. Yeah. That's right. And I believe, even to this day, my hand on my heart, right, he should have never had that fight. You know, Buster Douglas, who was he? He was a dustman. You know what I mean? He was a nobody. And he took his chances, and obviously that's his claim to fame. That is. But hand on my heart, he should have never had that fight.
But do you know what? Despite it being such a big loss, right? Mike Tyson himself, do you know what he said? He said that losing to Buster Douglas was the greatest moment of his career. He needed that fight to make him a better person and fighter, and give him a broader perspective on himself and boxing. That's what he actually said himself, so he saw it as a good thing.
Yes. Yeah, but in I suppose in other people's eyes it wasn't such a good thing, but for him, like you're saying, it was a good thing. It took the pressure off him, I think. Because like from 19 years old, coming from absolutely nothing, and then all of a sudden having 300 odd million in your bank, you know, it's going to change you. It's going to do things to you. You know, your circle changes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And he also said, I mean, you know, some of the controversies that he talks about through his whole life, and we're going to hit on that now with the rape trial and the prison and everything else. So for those of people who don't really know Mike's history, in July of 91, he was arrested for the rape of 18-year-old Desiree Washington. Okay, so it went on trial. He was convicted. He got 3 years in prison. Yeah. And, you know, if you want to read more about what actually happened, we don't want to go into all of that. And he went away and did 3 years in prison, rightly or wrongly. That also caused him sort of quite a big bit of controversy because he wasn't allowed to enter in a lot of different countries after that, was he, because of his conviction?
No. But also, she wasn't the only woman who done him a wrong, and his wife, Robin Gibbon.
Yeah.
This threw him over or what?
Well, you know, a lot of them didn't they? So, I mean, you've got a... Yeah,
I think he was a young man, had the world at his feet, all this money, and he was just being flocked by anyone, women, men, you name it. They was just all over him. And it probably done his head mentally. That's what I think.
So, I'll tell you what, let's look at... He also said that in prison it gave him a lot of time to reflect. Gave him a chance to learn who Mike was. And he converted because I think he was Christian when he went in, but Muslim when he came out. So he converted to a Muslim, didn't he? And I don't think that did him any harm at all. Although, you know, there's too much negative reaction to the Muslim religion, and I think that did him quite well.
Yeah, I think that gave him that inner peace, turned into the Muslim, and it gave him something to focus on while he was in prison.
Absolutely. So let's talk about, he came out of prison then. He's had a couple of easy comebacks. So he fought Peter McNeely, if you remember that guy. And he told everyone they're going to take a big dump in their pants. I remember that. And Buster Mattis, he beat him. And his first comeback fight grossed more than $96 million worldwide. And including a record United States $63 million for pay-per-view TV. I mean, and that's going back, right? That's going back. Now imagine how much that's worth in today's money. I'll tell you, it was, you know, I think it did 1.5 million pay-per-view buys. It's setting revenue records at the time.
Oh yeah, well you've got to think, if you go back to '96, he regained the WBA, WBC titles in '96, and he joined some greatest greats. You know what I mean?
And he beat our boy, didn't he? Old Frank Bruno in '96. I mean, and you've got to give credit to Frank Bruno because he just beat Oliver McCall. I remember the night. I was crying. I was so happy for him because Frank's a national celebrity and a great big hero to him. He's got a big art he has here, and I was lucky enough. I met Frank at a restaurant that's close to where you are now, Max. I actually had dinner with Frank Bruno and his son, Franklin. And we were sat, and the only reason we did that is we were sat on the next table, me and my pal. And he came in, and he was such a gentleman, and he really... bit of a big kick out. He was a Roma, by the way, a Roma in Basildon, where he was. I swear down, and I wanted to buy the man a drink. You know, he wouldn't take it off me. I was like, oh please, let me get you. You know, and just to say thanks. I didn't want nothing. You know, but anyway, so we beat. So we're not talking about Frank. We go on to Mike, and so we go back there. So of course he beat our bloke, and you know, knocked him out in the third round, and then there was sort of a big Lennox Lewis fight going to be. you know, going to be paid, but it would have been Lewis, you know, something about 13.5 million. But Lewis actually took a $4 million step aside money from Don King, right? So that Tyson could fight Bruce Seldon. And he expected to make 30 million instead, with the intention of Tyson would defeat him and then he would fight Lewis afterwards, right? Because he added the WBA belt, didn't he?
Yeah.
Again, when he beat sort of Seldon in the first round, by the way.
Well, don't come to a surprise really, because I think a lot of Mike's fights were done in the first round, second rounds. It was only the odd fighter that took him to 5-6 rounds. Well, many actually went the distance.
Well, I mean, I want to talk about another set of fights he had. You're gonna not be a surprise here, right? Evander Holyfield 1 and 2. Oh.
I think Mike was feeling a bit hungry in one of them fights.
Well, do you know what it was? I was watching that documentary about it, and I was sitting there listening, and I was watching what they were showing, and Evander Holyfield is leading with his head, and he split his eye open. He didn't do it once; he did it twice, once in each of the fights. So in the second fight, he thought, "Fuck this! I've had enough. Have some of that." Do you know what I mean? And he just sort of took a chunk out of him. I mean, because he was just being headbutted every 5 seconds, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, he was. He was literally just like batting in. He just thought, fuck this. Grabbed hold of him, took a big chunk out of his ear.
He beat him twice, didn't he? On the same side. And Evander Holyfield jumping up and down like a...
Hey. But all jokes aside and that, you know, probably 20 odd years later, they're actually in a business together. and the ear is involved.
Do you know what though? It's nice to see. To be fair, I mean, they could have taken it to the end of where it needed to be. But I'll tell you what. One of the other sort of fights of Mike Tyson's was the Tyson versus Lewis fight. Now this was something that should have happened earlier when Tyson was properly in his prime. I mean,
10 years before it did happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Because Lennox Lewis, he had the WBC, IBF, IBO, and linear titles at the time. I mean, I hate that linear title because it's like an air title. It's don't have a belt to it, does it?
Yeah.
And you just sort of
until sort of 2003 or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, 2002 it was. Yeah, but Tyson was actually. He was going to fight in Nevada for a more lucrative box office, but the Nevada Boxing State Athletic Commission refused him to license because he was facing another sexual assault charge. Wow. You know, so it's it's not it weren't good. Well, obviously, so then at the end, obviously the fight happened. We all know what happened there. Lewis knocked him out. You know, British fella banging out there about the American. Or could you call Lewis a British fella or a British Canadian? What do we? I don't know. He likes to fly the Union Jack. Yeah,
I think he did have the Union. No, I don't. I think he had the Canadian flag, didn't he?
No, he was a Canadian amateur, but he was actually he fought out of Britain, so he's a British fighter, which was great. We'll take him. Sorry?
He could have chose if he was going to back Canada or Britain, wouldn't it, basically? Because his passports and all that, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So I think that's the same with going off subject with Mark Butcher, the England cricket player. He had the choice to play him for Australia or England. So he chose England, obviously. And I think
exactly.
He had that option, didn't he? One or the other.
Yeah, and then of course, you know, once we come out of that, you know, we now start looking at the end of Tyson's career when the new face tattoo started to appear in it and all that. And of course, in August of 2003, he files for bankruptcy. You know, he earned 30 million for several of his fights and 300 million during his career at the time, but the media reported that he'd approximately 23 million quid in debt. So he files for bankruptcy, and everything sort of pours all over him. And he was on that documentary and he said, you know what, I can't be rich. I can't. I've got to either be rich or poor. I can't be anything in between. I just wouldn't know how to cope. So, you know, it just goes on. But then, of course, as he's starting to wane towards the end of career, and there's one thing I don't like when you see fighters is they fight for money in the end. When he fought Danny Williams, which is another one of the British lads, when he fought him, and Williams banged him out, knocked him out. Do you know what I mean? It's
sad to see and watch all that, because 20 years before that Williams wouldn't have stood a chance.
Well, the other thing as well, he had a knee ligament injury going into the fight, but he needed the money. And as a result of needing the money, he should never have beat Danny Williams. Never have lost to Danny Williams. He should have beat him quite sort of comfortably, but apparently he couldn't even throw a punch.
Yeah. It's sad to see someone so great end up like that. It's horrible to watch.
And he didn't bother with the Kilbride fight either. Kevin McBride, sorry. He just said, I'd never really turned up for that. I was just in it for a payday, and it's just really crazy,
Yeah. Just going back a few years with remember the saga with Mick Green, the boxer gangster geezer.
Oh, God. No, go on, tell the world.
Right, how I see it is, I think how it all started. Mike was in some shop in the early hours, and that Mick Green come in, sort of larging out with his boys. They had a bit of a scuffle there, and then later on, outside the nightclub, they had another fight, and clearly Mitch lost by the state of his face. I think he broke his nose, his eye was shut. I think he shattered his eye socket and that. And I think Tyson had a bit of a broken hand. That was it. But they did actually meet in the ring, and that did go like the full 12 rounds and that. But Tyson won that. But that Mitch Green, I'll never admit it, but you can watch the fight online, and clearly Tyson's all over him.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really need to go over all of his what he's achieved and things like that, because we all know and we've probably we're going to show all of the knockouts and all the other bits. I want to talk a little bit about his life after the ring, because we've seen him in films. He was in Hangover, and he was doing some other bits and pieces, and his appearance in The Hangover, I love that.
And he plays in a film called The Ip Man #3, and he's like a boss in Thailand or China or something, and he plays a good part in that. He does. So his acting wasn't just like a cameo like Hangover. He actually did play a decent part.
Well, I mean, let's have a little look at also some of his other business ventures as well. I mean, Cannabis Farm, that's doing all right.
Yes, well, I've heard that he's obviously he's done really well in his cannabis business, and I think he's going to be in Las Vegas. I think, don't hold me that, but he's opening up some cannabis ranch.
It's called the Tyson Ranch. It's there. It was quite funny because I was talking to one of the investors about it, who invested in the Tyson Ranch. And I mean, and I just sit there and think, absolute quality. You crack on, son. You do. Just got out there and do what it was.
Celebrities are getting bang on that Cannabis Farm, because at the moment I'm watching Jim Belushi. I am, and he's got his own cannabis plant, and his own farm. So I think all the celebrities getting on it because it's become legal, and they're all jumping on that business because it's money.
Well, of course it is. Anyway, guys, so we're going to look at Mike Tyson's fight record. Yeah, so he's got 50 wins and 6 losses. That's what we want. And one of the losses comes by disqualification, doesn't it? Really, and. Yeah. 2 no contests involved in that, so there's a few other sort of things. Let's take a look at who his losses were, and they were all towards the end of his career. So he lost twice to Evander Holyfield. One, he was knocked out. The second one, he was disqualified for obviously taking a chunk out of his ears. Yeah. He lost to All-In Norris, okay, as it went down as a no contest for some strange reason, but there you are. Norris was unable to continue after a Tyson foul. Right. So that's how that ended up. Andrew Galotta, right? So basically, it was originally it was like an RTD win for Tyson. So he didn't return back to the ring. If you remember, he went back into the corner. But later, it was awarded a no contest after Tyson failed a drugs test. And there was a lot of people that didn't hear about that.
Yeah, I never heard about that. I want to get you all in. Oh, mate.
Yeah, oh well, Wikipedia. Then, of course, you know, he lost to Lennox Lewis, which we've talked about. Then he won against Clifford Etienne between them and then his final 2 losses of Danny Williams and Kevin McBride. And that was pretty much it. I mean, he was done by 38 years old. And you have to sort of say, I don't blame him. And then, of course, the Buster Douglas loss, which we've spoken about.
That's this loss for him, because it was so sad. Like I got a picture in my head, him fumbling around on the floor for his gum shield and that, half in his mouth, trying to get himself up. It was awful to watch. It really was.
It was. And I'll tell you something I want to talk about, you know, just before we finish on Tyson. If you go back to 1985, this guy had 15 fights in 1985. 15 of them. All knockouts. All knockouts. There ain't fighters around that do 15, is there? I mean, it just is sick, isn't it? Not sick, but it's just amazing.
Well, look, there's a little stat, right? Tyson, 85, done 15 odd fights in 1 year. And you got Conor McGregor from UFC, he's a massive star. He had 15 fights over 8 years.
Well, not just that. In just those 2 years alone, 28 fights Tyson had in 1985, 1986 in total. 13 in the second year, 1986, 15 in the first year. And there ain't a professional fighter out there in the heavyweight division who's come anywhere close to that. Close to that. And I think in all of those 28 fights, absolutely no word of a lie, only 2 went the distance. The rest he knocked out.
Yeah.
I mean, that is absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. But if you asked me and you said to me, where would you have called the line? I think if I was Tyson and I didn't have the money worries that obviously he had, after the Lennox Lewis loss, that would have been it for me. You know, he was 35 years old, nearly 36, and I think, you know, he needed to call it a day. But this is what happens with people who don't understand money. You know, you've all got to earn a coin, and unfortunately for him, fighting was the only way.
Yeah, and I think, I'm sorry to say this, but that's all he ever knew was fighting from sort of a little boy, sort of 7, 8 years old. That's all he ever knew was fighting. That's how he was brought up, rough areas. You know, he had to be hard and fight to survive, and that is how he had to live all his life. And I don't think he knew any better back then. No,
so definitely the way to be. It's fighting to survive.
It was, but now he's more of a chilled out man.
Well, that's good because he'd end up in prison.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, thanks for joining us for another episode. And this has been Boxing History. I really enjoyed this one, Max. Who do you reckon next time? I'll tell you what, Don King. We'll move on to Don King, see if we can... see if we can wind up. All right, guys, thanks very much for joining us today. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. And, of course, we'll see you on the next episode. Catch you later, guys.
See you later.